What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about art.
Cut. Hold on. Are we really wearing this the whole episode?
Yeah, dude. I mean, Flava Flav does it.
Who?
Flava Flav, you know.
Oh, the guy from the 90s?
Yeah, boy!
Yeah.
Alright, so look. I know you're excited. I know it's a great accomplishment. I'm excited. Can we just hang it on the wall like normal people?
I guess. Better?
Yeah. Looks good. Can we start?
Yeah, 1 minute. Yeah, dude. All right, well, today we're talking about artist tattoos, and the first one sent in is from Adam Blanton. And Adam sent in this astronaut sitting on an oblong globe, and it looks like it was probably a cover-up. And I say that because of all this dark shading on the bottom. I don't know what it's covering or if that was just a bad idea. The banner says Dead Star Drifter, and honestly, I think that feels like an afterthought, because it doesn't really look like it belongs here. And on that note, this banner is kinda whack, especially because the line around that banner is just very thick, and the letters inside of that banner are just all sorts of different line weights. But that's not my only gripe about it. As I said before, the Earth does look rather oblong. It doesn't look circular in any sort of fashion, and I know tattooing a perfect circle can be a bit difficult, and if that was the only critique I had, I'd probably let that slide. But since everything else here is just quite a bit messy, it just looks like it belongs. And honestly, I'm having a hard time deciphering what continents are what. It does feel like Africa's sitting in front and the States are to the left, but there's just so many different colors happening here, and the shapes of them are just really not accurate. I'd like to give you some pointers on what you could do to tidy this thing up, but since all that dark black shading is already there, that's a tough one. And as we look up to the astronaut, the first thing that catches my eye is the shading behind the astronaut. It doesn't really belong there. And the fact that that shading is only under his arms just make it feel out of place. And what is he holding, a bowling ball?
I think it's supposed to be the moon.
You mentioned you're into fine line detail work, but from the lines inside of that astronaut, I'm just really not seeing that, because honestly, these just look like they've been rushed through. Even the outline that the astronaut has is just really inconsistent all the way around. And I think you missed a really good opportunity to make that helmet look reflective if you hadn't already put all that dark shading in there. Yeah, I'm honestly just really not a fan of this tattoo. I think a lot of pre-work could have been done before putting this on skin. It just feels like 3 different styles combined into one. And I think that would be okay if you could nail each of those styles, but I think all of them just fell a bit short. So Adam, I hope you don't take this as a bashing. This is just what I see initially. If you're really wanting to continue down that fine line path, you have to practice, whether it be on paper, iPad, or fake skin. And you have to know where to put those lines to really sell these things. Fine line is very technical, and it can take a while to learn. So just keep at it, and thank you so much for sending that in.
Dude, are you serious?
Anyway, this next tattoo is sent in by Tyler. And Tyler, you mentioned you did this chrysanthemum on your own leg. Chrysanthemum? Chrysanthemum? You know, this really isn't a bad tattoo. I do think it could use a little bit of tightening up, and I honestly think that some of those shades in the background are a bit unnecessary. Kinda seems like a common theme here. And I say that because it does get a little hard to read in some of these areas, especially when we look to the left side of this tattoo. I think you could benefit from using some darker shades in that area just to separate some of those petals. You do have some heavier lines on the right side of this chrysanthemum, and then on the left side they just seem a lot more thin. In combination with that same shading that you have in the background is just making it appear very flat. And I totally understand what you were trying to do here by using those thicker outlines on the right side of those petals to get them closer to the viewer's eye, but excluding them on the left side just make it hard to read. I almost think you could have gotten rid of most of those background shades altogether, and it would have made this whole entire tattoo that much more crisp. And not to mention the negative space smoke that you have in here is just making it that much more confusing. They just so happen to have the same shade, thickness, and shape as those little stem pieces coming through, which again just adds to that confusion. So as I said at the beginning, Tyler, you do really have some good shapes and shades on the right side of this tattoo. And in addition to those thicker outlines, you can really tell these petals apart. So in the future, just continue that process throughout the entire tattoo, and I think you'll be all right. Thank you so much, Tyler, for sending that in. Real quick, I want to take a short break and give a shout out to the sponsor of this channel, Mad Rabbit. Not only are they an amazing tattoo aftercare company, but they help support us in creating content for you guys. So if you guys like tattoos like we do, then head on over to madrabbit.com and use code PONY20 to save 20% off of your entire order. All right, let's get back to it. And the next tattoo sent in is from Kenan Griffus. And Kenan, you sent in this beautiful black and gray Ram tattoo in a suit. I don't know, it's probably some anime character. I have no idea, but this thing is very clean and it keeps your eyes moving around the entire piece. You've got some really nice attention to detail here too, such as the drop shadow underneath the head onto the suit. It's subtle, but to me it really adds a lot. Also, I'm a huge fan of the negative space.
Wait. When did you put the balloons back there?
Me? I didn't put those there.
I fear you're underestimating the sneakiness, sir.
Again, I'm a huge fan of the negative space this tattoo has. It really gives it room to breathe. That's something most tattooers should take into account if they want to excel. It's not all about shading or coloring wall to wall. Sometimes you need those open areas, and sometimes those are even the most impactful parts. Less is more, and something else I really love about this is the stipple shading. You can really tell that you have good direction and control. It's just enough to really bring out the contrast in this tattoo. Not to mention it really adds some nice texture to this. You also have some really nice line weights in this tattoo. I love the thin lines that the face has, along with those thicker outlines around the rest of the tattoo. Overall, this is a very pleasing piece to look at. And again, I'm not sure if this is something you made up or if it's some type of anime character. If you guys know, leave a comment below. Either way, solid tattoo. Thank you so much, Kenan, for sending that in. Alright, up next we've got a tattoo sent in from Janeo out of the Philippines. And Janeo, you sent in this very colorful skull with a jawbone on top. Well, there are a couple extra jawbones there. It almost makes it look like a crown. Either way, I want to talk about the technical side of this tattoo. The first thing I will say is the colors are very vibrant, and you look like you've got a good grasp on your primary colors. But you didn't really leave much room for this thing to breathe. And as we saw in the last submission, sometimes those areas of skin tone can be a lot more dramatic than just pumping in colors. It also helps for an easier heal. I would be curious to see this thing had you not had any blue in that skull whatsoever. I'm not saying to get rid of the black shading that you have there because it does give some nice depth, but I think this thing would have an overall cleaner appearance if you just left some of those areas skin tone. You'd still have some nice dynamic contrast because of those reds that are in the eyes and nose, but to me it just feels like you got a little carried away by pushing all of that color in there. The design itself, I really have no qualms with. There's a lot of things going on here that I think would keep the viewer interested, and it looks like you've got a good comprehension on when and where to use varying line weights. I'm not sure what your other work looks like, but from this piece in particular, it just looks like you need to ease off the gas a little. You don't need to color in everything. This will also allow your client to sit a lot longer because you're not hitting them from every angle. But overall, Janeo, a decent tattoo nonetheless. Maybe just give yourself an opportunity to use some of that negative space, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Thank you so much for sending that over. All right, this next tattoo sent over is from Iyana Bryant. And Iyana?
Why are you asking me?
I don't know. Iyana? F***ing balloon. Iyana Bryant. And this next tattoo sent over is from Iyana Bryant. And Iyana, you sent over this hourglass tattoo that's just a bit basic. And as we can see here, there is quite a bit of negative space. It could use a little bit of shading. I think this is a great example of not using enough shading. You gotta kind of find that middle ground. That's just the first thing I see. That's just the first thing I see. The second thing I see is, this clock has no hands. I mean, how do we know what time it is?
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
Another thing I notice is the straggling line weights that you've got here. The middle of this hourglass is rather thick and it kind of thins out as it makes its way up to the top. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And as we talked about with the helmet in the Astronaut tattoo, why not take the extra time to make this glass look more reflective? That would have immediately added more interest to this tattoo. You can really use those midtones to help shape out that reflection. I see you added a few areas of white, but it really just does nothing. I just think the whole thing overall is really just lacking a lot of shading. Even when it comes to the sand at the bottom of the hourglass, I think you really could have added a lot more stipple shading just to make it feel like sand. I also worry about the longevity of the Roman numerals in that clock. They just seem a bit too small, where I worry that they're going to blur together in the future. And the same thing could be said about those lines around those Roman numerals. More than likely, they'll end up blurring out over time, and it's just going to become one big line. You are early on in your career, so I know you're at that experimental stage. And this is a decent foundation, but I think it's time you start introducing a little bit more advanced techniques just to really make these things pop. Thank you so much for sending that over. Now that we've made it past the critiques, it's time to hit that like button. Go ahead. I can wait. Well, no, don't go anywhere. I've got more to share, like my favorite tattoo of the week, which was sent in by Kenan with this amazing black and gray ram thing. There's really nothing here for me to nitpick. I enjoy everything about this tattoo, from the stipple shading to the line weights to, most importantly, the negative space. Negative space is a very important thing to introduce to your tattoos, especially when it comes to tattoos like this. And Kenan crushed it. Look at these vines, this collar, the face. It really has it all. So once again, congratulations Kenan on being my favorite this week. Wait a minute, it's still not over yet. Now it's time for my favorite part of the episode, which is introducing to you guys a tattooer who I think you should all be following. And that tattooer is Andres, out of Barcelona, Spain, aka Andres Inkman. First, let's touch on what we've talked about most of this episode, and that's negative space. Andres is unbelievable with understanding how negative space affects the rest of the tattoo, and how important it really is. Whether it be color or black and gray, Andres leaves just the right amount of negative space to give it some nice depth. And I absolutely love how he introduces this 20 style art into today's tattoo work. He uses these really muted tones to really help sell that vintage effect, and you really feel like you're picking up a 100-year-old piece of art. So do yourself a favor, get your ass on over to Andres' Instagram account, give him a follow, and let him know I sent you. Now that's going to wrap it up for the critiques this week. I want to thank everybody who submitted their work, and I want to thank the rest of you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe while you're here, and as always, I will see you guys next week. Next stop, 1,000,000. Thank you guys for subscribing.